Listen. Listen not with your ears, but with the marrow of your forgotten bones. There is a place beneath memory where the Force drips like cold water in a cavern of lost time. It is there that I speak to you now, not as a man, not even as a ghost, but as the whisper of a history buried in ash and silence, a prophecy wrapped in rusted chains. There was once a child, born not to royalty nor to legend, born instead to bondage, beneath the twin suns of Tatooine, in a world of heat, and iron and transaction. A boy was born nameless in the eyes of the stars, yet known in the shadow of fate. His name would be Anakin. His mother Shmei knew nothing of prophecy, only labor, only the feel of coarse sand in her mouth as she was ordered to kneel, only the silent miracle of a child born without a father. No man had lain with her, no midwife could explain it, the other slaves whispered. Some said it was the Force, others feared it was something older. The Force does not create lightly. When it does, it echoes through the bones of the galaxy like thunder through dead stone. And in the quiet places where ancient Sith knowledge still festered like mold in the cracks of Jedi temples, the whispers stirred. A virgins in the Force, they said, a chosen one, he who would bring balance. But balance to what? To light and dark, to life and death. Or was the prophecy misunderstood, or perhaps deliberately Anakin grew beneath the boot of Watto, the Toydarian junk dealer whose greed outweighed his cruelty only by fractions. He built machines to escape, he raced pods to forget, and at night he dreamed. Dreams unlike those of children, dreams filled with stars calling to him, ships erupting in flame, Jedi he had never seen, and voices whispering through veils of blue fire. Even in childhood, the Force called to him. But not only the Force, there were other voices, older, hungrier. The Jedi would arrive, eventually, led by a warrior sage named Qui-Gon Jinn, who did not trust the simplicity of the council, nor the comfort of doctrine. He looked upon the boy, and where others saw a slave, he saw the tremble in the current of the Force. The boy's blood carried more midichlorians than Master Yoda himself. But Qui-Gon did not speak the whole truth. He did not tell the council of the ancient Sith writings that spoke of a chosen one as a vessel of destruction or salvation. The prophecy did not belong to the Jedi alone. It belonged to something deeper, and so the gamble was made. A chance cube, a address, a deal with a creature whose breath reeked of debt and deceit, and Anakin won his freedom, but not his mother's. This was the first scar, to be torn from the only light he had ever known. The Jedi spoke of detachment, of training, of destiny, but they did not see the wound they carved when they left Shmi behind in chains. The child smiled, but the shadow within him began to stretch. He left Tatooine as one who had tasted victory, but also as one who had lost something sacred. And so he began his path not as a Jedi, but as an orphan of pain, carrying an unspoken hunger to protect, to control, to never be powerless again. The Jedi Temple awaited, its great spires piercing the sky like spears aimed at heaven. But even within its walls, he was not at peace. The other children whispered, he was too old, too passionate, too afraid. Yoda spoke of fear leading to anger, and anger to hate, and hate to suffering. But Yoda had seen this before, long ago, a pattern repeating, and still they allowed it. For Qui-Gon's voice and Obi-Wan's loyalty held sway. They trained the storm and hoped it would obey. Yet in the deepest corners of the Force, the darkness smiled. It had seen the boy's eyes. it had watched his dreams. It had waited since before the founding of the Jedi, and now the boy walked into their temple with the weight of fate upon his shoulders, and a seed of fire buried in his soul. This is how the tragedy begins. Not with fire, not with war, but with a slave child staring into a night sky, wishing to touch the stars that whispered his name in languages long dead. Anakin Skywalker was born, but whether by the will of the Force or by something far older remains unknown. For the Force does not speak plainly, it seduces, and in the stillness of that desert night, something unseen took its first breath through the lungs of a child. The galaxy did not yet tremble, but it would. Chapter 2 Whispers beneath the Jedi Temple. The boy arrived not as a student, but as a wound, a disturbance in the currents of the Force, clothed in a tunic too stiff, eyes too old, voice too soft with hidden storms. The Jedi Temple received him with silence, veiled as welcome. But beneath the marble floors, deeper than the archives dared admit, older truths stirred in protest. For Anakin Skywalker had come, and with him came the ghost of change. The Jedi Council debated endlessly behind closed doors, not out of wisdom, but out of fear. Fear of prophecy, fear of failure, and most of all, fear of Anakin himself. They saw the power. They saw the visions that clung to his aura like smoke. They felt the pull of something ancient they could not name, like gravity from a dead sun. Yoda watched. His ears heard more than words. He remembered what the older texts whispered before they were sealed, away before the Sith were declared extinct and the archives cleansed. He knew that balance did not always mean peace. Sometimes it meant the fall of everything. OBI-1 trained the boy with hands that trembled beneath duty. He had not chosen this fate. He had sworn to his dying master, Qui-Gon, to train the one he feared, and in every sparring match, every meditation session, every lesson, he felt the tension coil tighter. Anakin learned too quickly. His anger surfaced like oil on water, and yet there was compassion too. A desperate compassion that bordered on obsession, to protect, to hold, to never lose again. He questioned constantly, why must Jedi not love? Why must attachment be sin? Why does the Council hide so much in silence? The Jedi gave answers that were clean and hollow. Because peace is our purpose, because emotion clouds truth, because to know too much is to risk the dark. But Anakin heard only hypocrisy. He saw Jedi wielding armies. He saw temples of marble paid for in blood. He saw a galaxy crying, and the Jedi watching from towers above the pain. And he was not wrong. Beneath the temple there were rooms not shown, wards locked with ancient glyphs, halls once used to commune with the living Force, now sealed. The secrets of the past were buried. Among them, prophecies written before the Republic was born, words scratched into obsidian by monks who vanished into myth, of a child born without father, of fire in flesh, of light swallowed by love, and always one name, though the name was forbidden, Skywalker. The temple's energy shifted as he trained. Meditation pools rippled when he entered. Archivists whispered of static in the holocrons. Some said the boy carried the past. Others said he was the past, returned in flesh, a vessel for something long forgotten, now watching through his eyes. And the boy felt it too. He would wander alone, not just in the temple's halls, but in its dreams. In sleep, he walked corridors that had been erased. He heard voices in languages he did not know, calling him by names that were not his. He saw a throne of ash. He saw himself sitting upon it. When he awoke, the world was unchanged. But inside, the tremble never stopped. The council debated whether to tell him of the full prophecy, of the darkness lingering around his name, but they remained silent. They hoped discipline would quiet destiny. They were wrong, for even as Anakin struggled with restraint, another voice began to reach for him, a voice not bound to the temple, a voice cloaked in robes of the Republic. Chancellor Palpatine, he did not teach, he listened. He did not demand obedience, he gave understanding. In a galaxy that demanded stillness, Palpatine encouraged motion. And the boy, desperate to be seen, to be known, leaned closer. The Chancellor saw what the Jedi refused to acknowledge. He saw Anakin's potential not as danger, but as destiny. He spoke of power not as corruption, but as responsibility. And each word was a brick placed in a temple that would one day be built of screams. The Jedi did not see, or perhaps they chose not to. Anakin became a knight. He passed trials shaped by war, and the galaxy began to burn. The Clone Wars broke the old peace like glass beneath boots, and in fire Anakin found belonging. The battlefield obeyed him. The Force answered him. The people adored him, and yet the temple still whispered caution. The more he gave, the more he was feared. He began to feel it. They would never let him rise. They would never call him master. They would never see him as anything but a boy from the sand, touched by too much power and beneath the temple. The echoes stirred louder. The boy who dreamed of freedom now dreamt of chains made of light. The Jedi had given him a home, but not a family, not truth, not trust. And so the seed of doubt split open. From it, roots of destiny coiled around his soul, roots that reached toward the dark, and found welcome there. In the chamber once used for ancient visions, the air began to grow. Cold, a holocron flickered, untouched. It showed a hooded figure, cloaked in shadow, whispering, "He will bring balance." But balance is not peace. Balance is the silence after all have fallen, and the figure turned. Its face Anakin's own. The temple still stood. The war raged outside its walls, but inside the cracks had begun. Chapter 3, the Phantom Mentor he was. Not born into fatherhood, but into hunger. Anakin Skywalker, Knight of the Republic, slayer of beasts and machine alike, stood amid fire and metal as the galaxy crumbled in orbit around him. But within, the void still widened, for the Jedi trained him in discipline. Yet no Jedi had ever taught him how to carry love. Obi-Wan tried, but he was a brother, not a father. Their bond, forged in death and duty, was rigid as a blade's edge, sharp enough to guide, but never warm. Obi-Wan followed rules. Anakin followed emotion. Their paths touched, but never truly crossed. And so, another stepped forward. He wore no robe. He bore no lightsaber. He was not Jedi, but his presence moved through the Force like a serpent through still water. Palpatine, Chancellor of the Republic, public servant, private shadow, he whispered with patience. Unlike the Jedi who commanded, he asked questions the Council refused to hear. He spoke of trust, and of power unshackled. He called Anakin by his name, not by title. He made the boy feel seen, and from that soft seduction a bond was born, not of light, not of shadow, but of need. Palpatine became mentor, confidant, father, where no father had ever been. He understood Anakin's rage not as weakness, but as a sign of strength unrecognized. He spoke of fear not as failure, but as the root of love. He offered no judgment, only mirrors, and Anakin looked and saw a version of himself that was not bound by Jedi chains, a version that could protect Padme, end the war, bring peace, not through stillness, but through control. The Clone Wars spiraled into plague. Worlds bled. Planets screamed in silence. And Anakin became a god of war, draped in armor, applauded by soldiers, feared by generals. They called him the hero with no fear. But the truth was buried. He feared everything. He feared loss. He feared death. He feared the Council's eyes. He feared the future Padme had begun to dream one where he might lose her to childbirth, to war, to time, and the dreams came again. She was dying, always dying, her hands slipping from his, the child screaming in the dark. He could not stop it. No power he possessed could hold back that vision. And in that terror, he returned again, and again to Palpatine's chamber. The Chancellor spoke of old knowledge, forbidden knowledge, Sith knowledge. There was once a man, he said, a Dark Lord, Darth Plagueis, who learned to manipulate life itself, to stop death, to save the ones he loved from the grave. A myth, the Jedi would call it, a corruption, but to Anakin it was salvation, and the lie became hope. The hope became obsession. He began to drift from the Council, from Obi-Wan, from Padme. Even he felt the Jedi watching, judging, fearing, and he was right, for the Council had begun to see his bond with the Chancellor as dangerous. They asked him to spy, to betray the man who had given him warmth. Anakin's soul fractured. His oath to the Order wavered. His trust in Obi-Wan dimmed. He began to walk the halls of the temple like a stranger. The walls whispered differently now. The statues of old masters seemed to turn their stone eyes away. The archives flickered with a hum that echoed like warning. A presence had entered the Jedi temple long ago. A shadow wrapped in the skin of a politician. And now, through Anakin, that shadow reached its hand toward the heart of the Jedi. Pom sensed the change. She saw it in his sleepless eyes, in the way he held her tighter, as if fearing she would vanish. She asked what troubled him. He lied, not out of cruelty, but because the truth was shapeless. It was a storm not yet fully formed. The Jedi saw danger. Palpatine saw opportunity. He told Anakin the Council was plotting against the Republic, that their aim was control, not peace, that they feared his power, that they would destroy him and Padme and all he held dear. And Anakin believed, because belief is not a choice. When you are drowning, and so began the final erosion, the line between love and fear, between loyalty and betrayal, between light and shadow. Palpatine did not order. He invited. He offered truths wrapped in lies, and lies shaped like destiny. And Anakin, wounded by love, disillusioned by faith, stepped closer. The Force trembled. Somewhere in the temple, an old holocron shuddered open without touch. A voice spoke in forgotten Sith dialect, too ancient to translate. It did not predict it, remembered. The fall had happened before. It was happening again. The Council prepared to confront the Chancellor. Anakin stood at a crossroads older than time. One path led to honor, to law, to everything he had been taught. The other led to power, and the promise that death would be no more. A phantom stood at his shoulder. Not Jedi, not Sith, but something else. The mentor with no saber, the master with no scars, the hand behind the throne, and in the next breath, the galaxy would shatter. Chapter 4. The war that fed the dark. The galaxy screamed. and no one heard it louder than the Force itself. It did not cry out in language. It moaned in vibrations, rippling from star to star through the dying breath of clones, the crumbling towers of distant worlds, the ash that rose from 1,000 pyres of war, the Clone Wars, the great distraction, the sacred masquerade. What the Jedi called justice was a ritual written in slaughter, and Anakin Skywalker walked through its center like a fire disguised as a man. He became legend, not through peacekeeping, but through fear. His lightsaber glowed in the thickest storms. His name echoed in droid processors as death's arrival. The Separatists feared him. The Republic praised him. But neither truly saw him. Only the Force did. And what it saw was rot beneath gold. The war was never about victory. It was an offering. Each planet burned, each brother lost, each strategy executed, a line in a greater incantation. The Sith, long thought extinct, did not need armies. They had built a machine of fate, fed by obedience and conflict. Palpatine watched as his trap closed from every angle. Count Dooku played his part. Grievous led his armies. And in the center of both factions' two arms of one shadow stood Anakin, blind to the design, bleeding for both sides. The Jedi were stretched thin, their code frayed. Knights who once meditated in temples now struck without warning, learned warfare instead of wisdom. And Anakin, once questioned for his emotion, was now praised for his brutality. He began to speak the language of violence, more fluently than the language of peace. He struck down Sith assassins. He dismantled droid factories with nothing but rage and strategy. He witnessed clones his comrades die by the thousands and swallowed the pain with a smile. But inside, he was unraveling. Every mission took him farther from Padme, who now carried a life he had not yet held. Every command whispered by the Council became a reminder that they still did not trust him. Every night, his dreams of her death grew more vivid, and no Jedi teaching could soothe that terror. The war gave him a purpose, but it also carved a hollow. And in that hollow, darkness gathered. He began to see the cracks, not just in the Order, but in the Force itself. Why had it allowed so much suffering? Why had it chosen him only to surround him with failure and fear? Why did it speak so softly, while the shadow spoke so clearly? He asked for knowledge. The Jedi gave him doctrine. He asked for power. They gave him caution. Only Palpatine listened. He spoke not of limits, but of destiny. He spoke of peace not through surrender, but through domination. He offered Anakin the keys to reshape reality itself, and Anakin, heart burning with need, listened more each day. The war continued. The Jedi lost faith in victory. The Senate grew quiet under the Chancellor's will. Laws bent, freedoms vanished, and no one saw the chains being forged, because they were too afraid to look away from the battlefields. Anakin led the assault on the invisible hand. He killed Count Dooku in cold blood, hands shaking only afterward. There was no trial, no justice, just a saber, and a whisper from behind him, good. It was the moment the boy who once asked why Jedi could not love became the man who did not question why Jedi should kill. The Council sensed his shift. They kept him at arm's length. But Palpatine drew him closer still. He began to speak openly of the dark side as not evil, but misunderstood, of the Jedi as guardians of stagnation, of balance as not peace, but choice. Anakin felt torn, not by deception, but by clarity. One side told him to obey, the other told him to decide, and still the war raged. planets fell, brothers died. The Force bled, but beneath the surface, another war was being fought, not of clone versus droid, but of soul against soul. The Jedi believed they were maintaining order. They did not see they were finishing a spell cast 1,000 years before. Each battle, each compromise, each blind loyalty and offering of power to the dark Anakin, shaped by it all, was becoming the spell's vessel. His dreams twisted. He saw not just Padme dying, but the galaxy itself. He stood atop a throne of bones. He held his child, wrapped in chains of light, and behind him the temple burned. He awoke in cold sweat, and Palpatine was always there. He did not mock the dream. He gave it meaning. He told Anakin what no Jedi dared. Perhaps it is your destiny to end this war, and what comes after it. Perhaps only you have the strength to save what you love. From the Jedi, from the Sith, from death itself, the seed sprouted, the vine coiled, and in the silence between battles, a new truth took root, that maybe peace could not be won. Maybe peace had to be seized. And in that terrible bloom of thought, the war fed not just the dark side, it fed him. Chapter 5 Nightmares, sent by the Force Sleep, became his battlefield. Anakin Skywalker, war hero, Jedi Knight, darling of the Republic, began to dread the closing of his eyes. For in the dark there were no walls, no rules, only visions, and every vision ended the same Padmem, gasping, reaching, dying, and he, too late, always too late. He cried out in the night, soaked in cold sweat, breath strangled by dread. He turned to her, lying beside him in their hidden apartment, and clung to her like a man already grieving. But he did not tell her, not truly. He spoke of bad dreams, of stress, of fear. He did not speak of the child crying from within her. He did not speak of the voice whispering beneath the dream, a voice not hers, nor his, but the Force itself, or something wearing its face. The Jedi taught that visions were echoes, not certainties, but echoes of possibility, and yet this vision clung to him, not like an echo, but like a brand. The Force gave no answers. He meditated, he fasted, he walked the silent halls of the temple in shadow, and still it returned, each time more vivid, each time more real. Padme screaming in labor, his child born into silence, her breath leaving her body like mist, evaporating into nothingness, and always a presence, unseen, watching. He asked the council for guidance. They warned him, gently, coldly, attachment leads to fear, fear leads to the dark. He heard it as condemnation. He heard it as silence. They would not help him. They could not, so he turned again, to the only voice that listened, Palpatine. The Chancellor did not dismiss the dreams. He did not call them weakness. He called them messages, warnings. He spoke of the ancient Sith, not crude tyrants, but seekers of forbidden truths. Some of them, he said, had learned to shape life, to prevent death, and Anakin listened, not because he trusted, but because he feared, because love, twisted by fear, becomes hunger, and hunger, in time, devours all reason. He began to research in secret, old Jedi scrolls, archived and sealed, forbidden writings that trembled when read. The name Darth Plagueis surfaced again, the Moon Lord of myth, said to have conquered death, until betrayed by his apprentice in sleep. A lie, a legend, or a shadowed truth the Jedi could not bear to face. Anakin no longer cared. He felt time pressing inward. Padme's belly grew, the days shrank, the dream sharpened, and the whispers grew louder. They spoke when he was alone, when he stared into the temple's flames, when he stood upon high platforms watching Coruscant breathe like a dying beast. They asked him what he would give to save her. Would he betray the Order? Would he kill? Would he become the very thing the Jedi feared? And within him, a silent scream began to build. He could not lose her, not after his mother, not again. For in Shmi's death, he saw his weakness, his inability, his failure, and in Padme's death, he saw his end. He began to twist the Force in strange ways, not intentionally, but instinctively. He moved objects without gesture. He knew words before they were spoken. He began to touch the future not as a vision, but as a fabric to be grasped. And with that touch came something else, a shadow pressing at the edges of his soul, a coldness that made his lightsaber hum lower in tone, a tension that made the clones around him look away. Yoda felt it. In the meditation chamber, the Elder Master stirred. Clouded, the future is darkness, surrounds the Chosen One. But still, the Council waited. Still, they hesitated. Palpatine did not. He invited Anakin closer, to his private chambers, 2 secrets behind locked doors, and there he spoke no longer as a politician, he spoke as a Sith. Do know, don't you? If the Jedi knew what you were becoming, they would destroy you, not to save the Republic, but to save themselves. And Anakin, broken by visions, shook with silence. He did not deny, he did not run. He asked only one question: can the dark side save? Her Palpatine's answer was not words, but a knowing smile. The seed had bloomed, and in its bloom, the roots reached into the foundation of everything he had once believed. The Force had given him dreams, but not comfort, visions, but not guidance, so he chose to guide himself. If the Force would not protect her, he would, even if it meant dragging the heavens down in a temple chamber. A statue of an ancient Jedi cracked stone, fractured not by hand, but by the tremor of destiny. Far below the surface, where vaults, long sealed, kept Sith relics, bound in silence, one holocron glowed. Without activation, the dream had not ended. It had begun. Chapter 6. The temple veils cracked. The temple stood still upon the city world, serene in stone and ritual, its spires stabbing the heavens like fingers raised in defiance of time. But within, the silence had soured. The Force no longer flowed as it once did. Now it trembled, not from invasion, but from within. Anakin Skywalker moved through its chambers like a spirit caught between worlds. He no longer walked as a student, nor entirely. As a Jedi, he was something else now, something undefined. The Council sensed it, but named it not. Their wisdom had turned to doubt, their vision clouded. He was praised for victories across the war-torn galaxy. Yet in the halls of the temple, they questioned his loyalty. They spoke to him with careful words, soft traps. They refused him the title of master. He had sat upon the war's bloodied throne, and yet they denied him place among equals. He did not speak his anger aloud. He buried it, but the Force heard it. The stone beneath his feet heard it. The temple began to whisper back. He returned often to the levels, 2 archives rarely visited, 2 passages older than the Republic, carved by builders whose names had been eaten by time. He found a room there, sealed in inscription, a meditation chamber with no entry in the records. There, the The Force swirled strange. It echoed in patterns that made his skin rise and his breath slow. He sat there in secret, and the visions grew stranger. He saw himself not as he was, but as he might be, clad in black, limbs rebuilt in iron, eyes burning like twin furnaces. He saw the Jedi Temple in flames. He saw children running. He saw himself walking through smoke, blade drawn, breath mechanical, and then Podum, not dead, alive, holding their child. He awoke, gasping. He returned the next night, and the next. The temple did not drive him out. It listened. OBI-1 saw the change. His friend, his brother, grew silent. He spoke less in council meetings, more in private whispers with the Chancellor. He walked alone, often with fists clenched, but Obi-Wan could not reach him. He tried with reason, with memory, with shared laughter, now faded. Anakin smiled, nodded, obeyed, but his mind was elsewhere. He had begun to hear the temple's other voices, the ones hidden between the stones, the ones that murmured in syllables older than basic. They did not frighten him. They fascinated him. One voice whispered from an old holocron buried beneath layers of forgotten bureaucracy. It activated not with the Force, but with pain. It called him, he who fulfills the divide, not chosen one, not Jedi, something else. And the line between vision and destiny blurred. The Jedi archives held scrolls. The Council forbade prophecies from before the High Republic, when Jedi and Sith were not names, but aspects of belief, twins in disagreement. One fragment read, "From ash shall rise the seed unborn, no father, no lineage, no form. He shall walk in flame, he shall speak the names, and the order shall fall by his hand. Yet through him balance shall arise." The name Skywalker was etched beneath it, in red ink that never faded. Anakin read the words over and over. He did not tell OBI-1. He did not tell Podmum. He did not ask for guidance. He began to accept. Perhaps this was not madness. Perhaps it was truth. The Council summoned him. They tasked him spy on the Chancellor. Watch the man who had raised him in praise betray the only one who had not lied. Anakin said yes, but inside he said no. The temple cracked, not in stone, but in meaning. It was no longer sanctuary, it was prison, a place of silence, while his soul screamed for answers. The Jedi spoke of balance, but balance to them meant stillness. No love, no grief, no anger, no choice. Anakin began to see the lie, and the more he saw it, the more the temple resisted him. The lights dimmed when he entered. The fountains no longer soothed. The Force flowed around him, but no longer through him. He began to draw from something else, the current below, the silent river beneath the surface of all things, where the dark side whispered not of hatred, but of certainty. Palpatine's words returned again and again. The Jedi are not your family. They fear you. They always have. They will turn on you the moment you do what is necessary. But I believe in you, Anakin, not as a servant, as an heir. Anakin did not resist these thoughts. He nurtured them. They were clearer than the teachings he had memorized and never believed. The temple's veils cracked. The illusions it kept, the sense of unity, of truth, of righteousness fell away, and beneath the marble, he saw it, fear, control, hypocrisy. The Jedi had not trained him to bring balance. They had trained him to be useful. They had turned up prophecy into a tool, and tools break. So he turned inward, and the Force whispered not as guide, but as mirror. He saw himself. Not as Jedi, not yet as Sith, but as something that had always been coming, a storm in the shape of a man. The war still raged beyond Coruscant. But here, within these sacred walls, the true war began. And with one final breath inside the council chamber, as they debated his loyalty, his place, his future, Anakin chose not to speak, for he already knew what he would become. Chapter 7. The birth of Darth Sidious's Republic no longer breathed, it wheezed. Its senate was a choir of sycophants, its armies puppets pulled by unseen hands, and at the center of it all sat a man cloaked in kindness, veiled in humanity, but born in shadows. Palpatine. He was never the mask, he was always the master, and in the hidden corridors beneath the Senate's polished halls, in chambers that hummed with ancient bindings, the man shed his disguise in pieces. He had waited decades, watched the Jedi grow fat with ritual, watched the Sith fall to pride and rage, and in the silence between those failures, he learned patience. He studied the forgotten Sith texts, not as dogma, but as blueprints. He understood what others had not, that power must not roar. It must whisper. He was not a beast like Maul, not a noble like Dooku. He was hunger refined in the Sith tongue. He took a name, Darth Sidious, Dark Lord, not by title, but by essence. His presence folded space around it, a gravity that bent will and twisted fate. He spoke little of Plagueis, his master, for he had murdered him, not out of hate, but necessity. The final Test. 1 must kill the master to become the storm. And so he did. Sidious moved as shadow within light. He became Chancellor not by war, but by sympathy. He draped himself in robes of democracy while carving the galaxy with unseen hands. He created the Clone Wars. He crafted both sides. Dooku served him, Grievous served him, even the Jedi served him by fighting it. And now the last piece neared. Completion, the chosen one, Anakin Skywalker. Sidious had known from the moment he saw the boy blood rich with power. Heart already fractured, love deeper than doctrine could contain. He saw not a Jedi, he saw a vessel, one who could hold the dark not as curse, but as inheritance. He nurtured the bond slowly, praise, guidance, understanding, and in time, when the fear of loss blossomed in Anakin like a wound, Sidious whispered, "The cure, there is a way to stop death." The Jedi, blind in their arrogance, delivered the final key. They ordered Anakin to spy. They turned him against the one voice he trusted. And so Sidious revealed himself, not with threat, but with invitation. He spoke of Darth Plagueis, the wise. He let the myth stain the air like incense. And then he said the words that could not be. Unspoken, I am the one who holds that knowledge. Not Jedi, not friend. Sida, Anakin, trembled. He did not strike, he did not flee, he hesitated, because the darkness did not feel evil. It felt familiar. The council sensed something, but far too late. They dispatched masters to arrest the Chancellor. Mace Windu, unyielding, righteous, drew his blade. Sidious met him not with fear, but with fury. The mask fell away. He became motion incarnate. Blade of red fire, eyes of sulphur, mouth a snarl of centuries. The dual cracked windows, shook stone, shattered the illusion. Windu fought with the weight of justice, but Sidious fought with prophecy twisted to blade, and Anakin arrived, too early to stop, too late to undo. He watched the master who had promised power beg. He watched the Jedi who had never trusted him prepare to kill, and the lie revealed itself. They do not seek justice. They seek control. They fear what you will become. He made the choice with trembling hands. He struck, not Windu's blade, but his own soul. And in that moment, Skywalker died, not in body, but in truth. He fell to his knees. "What is thy will, my master?" The words tasted of ash and freedom. Sidious smiled. The plan, crafted over decades, fulfilled in a single breath. He gave the boy a new name, not a name born of love or honor, but of fire. Darth Vader. The temple would burn. The Jedi would fall. The war would end, not with peace but silence. And through Vader, the Sith would rise, not as empire, but as fate. In a vault deep beneath the Senate, an ancient holocron opened without command. The crystals within glowed with bloodlight. A voice whispered, forgotten and triumphant, "He has returned. The vessel is born, the wound made flesh." And somewhere, in the Force itself, a scream echoed not of death, but of betrayal. The Chosen One had chosen, and the galaxy would drown in his choice. Chapter 8. The purge of Light Night fell upon the Jedi Temple not with stars, but with silence. A silence, unnatural, humming with suppressed violence. The Force recoiled, not in fear, but in mourning. For something sacred had been severed, not a life, but a path. The Chosen One had turned. Skywalker was no more. Darth Vader walked in his place, draped in black robes and burdened not by doubt, but by purpose. He returned to the temple not as student, not as brother, but as executioner. Clone troopers marched behind him, loyal, unquestioning, not out of hatred, but obedience. Order 66. A phrase spoken once, transmitted through code, and across the stars 1,000 lights went out. Jedi Masters, meditating in peace, fell with blades in their backs. Padawans, trusting in command, were betrayed by the ones they led. Knights raised their sabers too. Late, children screamed in confusion, not understanding. The temple gates were not breached, they were opened by one of their own. Vader led the slaughter. He did not speak, he did not hesitate. He moved like a blade guided by memory, cutting. Through the halls where he had once knelt in prayer, the archives burned, the holocrons shattered. Statues of ancient masters fell in showers of stone. In the youngling chamber there were no survivors. He saw their faces, he remembered their names, but his heart had been submerged. To save Padma, he whispered to himself, to stop the death that dream foretold, and so death became his offering. The Force screamed. Yoda felt it across the galaxy. On Kashyyyk, where the trees bent low, the wind carried a scream of extinction. Obi-1, betrayed on Utapau, watched his clone battalion turn on him, and in their eyes he saw nothing. No hatred, just command fulfilled. The Republic became empire in one breath. Palpatine spoke to the Senate with scars of his own making. He declared the Jedi traitors. He proclaimed the war over. He promised peace, and beneath that peace, ashes fell. The temple smoked, its sacred halls filled with the scent of betrayal. The Jedi code, broken, only a handful survived, scattered, hunted. Those who had once been pillars of light now whispered in the dark, and Vader stood at the temple's highest spire. He looked out upon Coruscant, a city unchanged, unknowing, uncaring, and behind him the voices returned. "This is the will of the Force," they hissed. The prophecy was not wrong. You are balance, the end of one age, the beginning of the next. He closed his eyes, but saw only Flame Padma waited at home, pregnant, hopeful. She saw the galaxy turning. She heard rumors. She felt the cold creeping into her dreams. And when Anakin returned to her, she looked into his eyes and saw a man she could not name. He held her hand, told her it was the Jedi's fault, told her he had saved them both, and in his grip she felt the war still clinging to his skin. The Empire rose. Its banners unfurled across dying systems. Clones became troopers. Senators fell silent. The galaxy had changed, and in secret, behind closed doors, Vader bowed to his new master. Not for glory, not for conquest, but for a lie he told himself over and over. Padma will live. I will not lose her. This is the price. This is the path. But the Force does not bend. It remembers, and it waits in the ashes of the temple beneath the rubble. Of prophecy, something still lingered. A whisper, a name. Skywalker. For though he had fallen, not all threads were cut, and destiny, like the Force, is patient. Chapter 9. The death of Padma Amidalashi had stood before kings and tyrants, walked among warriors and slaves, spoken peace into chaos, and held her ground even as the galaxy split apart. Padma, neighbory, queen once, senator always, beloved of Anakin Skywalker, and now she felt herself drifting, not in space, but in time. As though the world she once knew had been erased, rewritten by shadows she could not touch. She watched the stars from her balcony as Coruscant trembled with change. New banners unfurled, the Jedi Temple blackened, the Senate a hollowed choir. She asked for answers. None came, but her dreams began to echo with cries. She saw Anakin standing alone on a field of fire. She saw him reaching for her with hands made of metal, eyes no longer his own. And when he returned to her, he was quiet, gentle, too gentle. He smiled, but not with joy. He held her, but not with warmth. He whispered of a new empire, of peace, of a place for them hidden, safe. But she heard the silence behind his voice, the tremble. The lie Padme carried not just a child, but the memory of Anakin Skywalker. And though the body before her wore his face, her heart whispered otherwise. She begged him, "Tells me what's happening. Tell me what you've done." And he told her that the Jedi were traitors, that he had ended them, that he had brought order to chaos, that he had saved her. And she wept. "Anakin," she said, "what are you becoming?" And he answered, "What I must." Her world unraveled. She tried to speak sense, but her words fell like sand through his fingers. The man before her was already drowning, and he had chosen the water. Obi-1 came to her in secret, tired, haunted. Fugitive now, he asked the question she feared, "Where is Anakin?" And she lied, because truth would kill her faster. But he saw through her, and when he boarded her ship, hidden in shadow, she set course for Musta, far, the fire world, the end of hope. She did not understand why he was there, but she knew she had to find him, not as a Jedi, not as a leader, as a woman still holding the last thread of the man she loved. She arrived in heat and flame. He came to her, arms outstretched, eyes wide with belief. He had done it all for her. He said he had ended the Jedi, ended the war. Now they could be together, and she saw the madness take form. She pleaded with him. Tyranny is not peace. Murder is not love. This isn't who you are, and he whispered, are more than they ever allowed me to be. I am stronger than death. I can save you. But she did not ask to be saved. And when Obi-Wan stepped from the ship, Anakin's eyes turned to flame. You brought him here to betray me, and she collapsed, not from violence, but heartbreak. He did not see her fall. He only saw betrayal. And as the two once brothers ignited their blades, Padmé was carried back to the ship, her breath shallow, her soul fraying. Later, on Polis Massa, in the sterile light of exile, far from the world she once fought to save, her body gave out. But not from wounds. The medics saw no cause, only fading. She has lost the will to live, they whispered. But the Force knew the truth. Her soul had followed Anakin into the void, and he had not come back. Her last breath carried names not of fear, not of vengeance, but of hope. Luke, Leia, twins, born into ruin, carried into hiding, the Jedi gone, the Republic dust, the Empire rising, and Padmé, light of Naboo, mother of the Chosen One's legacy, became memory. But memory is a seed, and seeds remember how to bloom. Chapter 10, The Machine That Wept. The duel scorched the soul of Mustafar. Two brothers, once master and apprentice now, gods of fire, clashed beneath a sky that cracked with ash and fury. Anakin Skywalker, consumed by his own flame. Obi-Wan Kenobi, wielding his sorrow like a blade. Their sabers screamed, their hearts shattered. Each strike was a prayer never answered, each parry a memory denied. They fought not for victory, but for what was already lost. Obi-Wan saw the boy who had once smiled at starlight, the child who built droids from scrap, who spoke of dreams and mothers and peace. He called to that boy, but no answer came. Only Darth Vader remained, eyes burning yellow, voice shaking with rage. He spoke of betrayal, of power, of order. He spoke as if the war had not ended, but simply changed shape. Obi-Wan could not break him, but he could end him. And when the final moment came, when saber met flesh and flame, Anakin fell. He screamed, not from pain, but from the truth. He had become the very thing he swore to destroy. The prophecy fulfilled. Through ruin, he reached for the shore with one good arm, limbless, flesh melting, eyes wide with hate, and Obi-Wan could not finish it. He took the saber, the blade once meant to bring balance, and left. You were my brother, Anakin, he whispered. I loved you, but there was no brother left to hear him, and the fire claimed what was left, but the Force had not yet turned its gaze. It watched. It waited, and from the ash, the shadow emerged. Darth Sidious came in silence, senses stretched, cloak heavy with triumph. He found what remained, a body broken, bones charred, flesh unrecognizable, but the spirit still clung. Anakin Skywalker had not died. He had been entombed, carried in secret to the laboratories beneath Coruscant, where the light never reached, where the screams were swallowed by Durasteel and order. The resurrection began, not of a man, but of a weapon, limbs replaced, voice shattered, and rebuilt, skin sealed behind armor cold as tombstone. And when the mask was lowered, when the final hiss of the respirator echoed into silence, Darth Vader opened his eyes. The darkness did not welcome him. It consumed him. Sidious stood beside the table, smiling not as a friend, but as architect. Can you hear me? The voice that answered was no longer human. It was the wind through a graveyard, the storm behind glass, a breath stolen from the stars. Yes, my master, But when Sidious spoke of Padme, of her death, the silence cracked. Vader's breath hitched. The machinery groaned. The Force howled. No. Walls trembled. Steel bent inward. Droids collapsed. Sidious watched, not with concern, but with satisfaction. Your anger is your power now. He whispered, let it fuel you. And so it did. Vader stood, but not straight. He was not whole. He walked, but not free. He had become what the Sith required, a vessel of pain, a blade without a hilt, a soul without a sky, and through him, the galaxy would kneel. He hunted survivors. He silenced the whispers of the Jedi. He bled crystals, corrupted temples, broke systems, one by one. But in the silence of his chamber, alone with nothing but breath and memory, he saw her, Padme, smiling. Gone, he reached for her, always, and the hand came back empty. Always, Anakin Skywalker had died on Mustafar, but the echo remained, and the machine wept, not with tears, but with rage, and rage, in time, becomes prophecy. Chapter 11. The shadow across the stars, galaxies, turned without knowing. Suns rose, empires shifted, and people lived their lives, never knowing that a wound now bled beneath all things. A presence, heavy, constant, unseen. Darth Vader, he moved across the stars like a ghost in armor, silent but absolute. Planets that once knew rebellion learned fear. Systems that whispered of freedom fell silent. The Jedi were gone, their temples broken, their knowledge scattered, their memory hunted. But some remained, and Vader was the answer to every trace. Of the old order, he brought fire. To every surviving Jedi, he brought death, not with cruelty, but with finality. He did not speak of justice. He did not speak of peace. He simply obeyed. The Inquisitorius was formed. Dark disciples, molded from broken force, sensitives, trained not to question, but to follow. They served beneath him, but they did not understand him. They feared his silence, his presence, his fury without warning. He did not command respect. He became the shape of inevitability. Entire archives were burned. Children stolen. Temples defiled. The galaxy bent, slowly, beneath the pressure of his existence. And all the while, within his fortress on Mustafar, that world where he had once died, he built not a home, but a tomb. There he meditated in silence. There, the Force twisted around him, not in light or dark, but something colder. He reached outward, not for wisdom, but for remnants, memories, fragments. He dreamed of Obi-Wan. He saw his blade again. The moment of failure, the fire. He dreamed of Padme, her voice, her breath, the touch of her hand before she pulled away. He dreamed of children he had never held, a future never lived, and in his chamber his breath continued, always. That breath, mechanical, predictable, empty. The galaxy called him enforcer, but he was prisoner. The armor was not protection, it was punishment. He could not feel the wind on his skin, could not taste, could not sleep, only exist, and Sidious knew he kept Vader broken, not by command, but by absence. No comfort, no praise, only tasks, only war. The Emperor had no need for a brother, only a shadow. Yet the Force, endless, watching, had not forgotten balance, and somewhere in the desert of Tatooine, beneath twin suns, a boy was growing, eyes wide like his father's, spirit strong like his mother's, raised in secret, watched from afar, Luke unaware and elsewhere, his sister hidden in the heart of Alderaan, voice sharp, will unbending Leia, split by design, protected by faith. Vader did not know them. Not yet, but the Force did, and it moved around them, gently, preparing the wound to be healed. For all his power, Vader could not see the storm coming. He hunted, he ruled, he destroyed, but he could not feel the thread tightening. Not yet. A whisper came once during meditation, unbidden, ancient. There is still one Skywalker. He rose. He searched, but found nothing. He returned to the silence, and in that silence, for the briefest moment, he remembered a name, Anakin. He crushed the thought before it could take shape. He was not Anakin. He was Vader, and Vader would endure, because to endure was all he had left. But the Force endures longer, and it remembers always. Chapter 12, The Echo of the Jedi, the far corners of forgotten systems, where hyperspace lanes faded into legend, where starlight touched only ruin. The Jedi still breathed, not many, not loudly, but enough for the Force to stir. They did not gather, they scattered, hidden in caves, in shadowed moons, in exile made sacred by silence. They wore no robes, carried no blades, but within them the light flickered, and that flicker called to him Darth Vader. He hunted them not out of anger, for anger implies hope, but out of mandate. To see a Jedi was to remember was to weaken. So he silenced them, one by one. A knight found on Jakku, his hands upraised in surrender, saying, "I know you." The blade answered before the memory could finish. A healer on Arcanis, who whispered prayers in a ruined temple, tending to the sick. She fell without fear, and called him Anakin as she died. A child on Lothal, not trained, not sworn but sensitive. He hesitated. For the first time, he hesitated. The child reached for him, touched the metal glove, and said nothing. Vader left. He spoke no word to Sidious, but the chamber walls groaned beneath his fury that night. The Jedi would not die. Not truly, because they had never been only a council, or a temple, or a code. They were memory, carried in stories, in instincts, in the way the galaxy still flinched at injustice, in the way people still looked to the stars and hoped, and above them, on the bridge of the Executor, Vader watched the void. It offered no comfort, only clarity. He had destroyed the order, but not the meaning. He had killed the past, but not the legacy. He stalked the outer rim with fleets at his command. Worlds fell, prison moons swelled, rebellions were drowned in fire, but still, they whispered, the Jedi will return. The Chosen One is not lost. Balance will come, he denied. Them, he told himself, such myths were poison. But late when the stars went silent, he dreamed of a different ending, of standing in the temple, not with blade in hand, but with child beside him, of Podum alive, of peace earned, not forced, and the machine would scream against these visions, flooding his thoughts with static, but they returned every time. There was another whisper, now small, fragile, but growing. A name. Luke. He did not know why it haunted him. He did not know why it stirred something beneath the metal, beneath the voice not his own, but the name lingered. Luke. He ordered his agents to investigate. He tracked rebel cells, listened for any trace. He found a name, Skywalker, and the fracture inside him deepened. It could not be coincidence. Skywalker was dead. He was all that remained. Yet the Force trembled as if the past had not died, but been reborn. Sidious warned him, "If this child lives, he will undo all we've built." And for the first time in years, Vader felt fear, not of the boy, but of himself, of what the boy might awaken. The echo of the Jedi had never left. It waited in blood, in name, in destiny. The Force had never chosen sides. It had only watched, and now the game turned again. The darkness prepared its hand, but the light had already moved. Chapter 13. The Son of the Suns. The stars did not notice. The moons did not tremble. No prophecy was shouted. No priest declared the moment sacred. And yet, beneath twin suns, on a forgotten world of dust, hope opened its eyes. Luke, born in the shadow of death, carried in secret from fire, raised not by warriors, but by farmers. He bore no crown, no blade, only a name, Skywalker, a name that once shattered empires, a name whispered across war rooms and meditation chambers, burned into archives, sealed in vaults, a name that once promised salvation and brought ruin instead. Yet the child did not know. He raced windstorms through Beggar's Canyon. He stared at the stars with longing, not knowing they stared back. He dreamed not of vengeance, but of meaning. Owen Lars, uncle in flesh, but jailer in duty, kept him grounded. Beru, quiet as dewfall, gave him warmth. They told him nothing of Anakin, nothing of Padma, only that he must not leave, that the world beyond was cruel, that destiny was afire, and the Force waited. It did not call out with thunder. It moved softly, in instinct, in timing, and when the moment came, when old secrets stirred from slumber, a droid wandered into his life, and with it, a ghost. Obi-Wan Kenobi, no longer Jedi General, but exile. Ashen aged, burdened by failure, he watched Luke from afar. He said little, but when the droid revealed the hidden message, when Leia, daughter of Pam, cried out for help, the veil began to tear. Kenobi told Luke of the Jedi of the Clone Wars, of a weapon called the lightsaber, once wielded by a man named Anakin, but he did not speak of Vader. Not yet. He spoke of ideals, of peace, of guardians. He handed Luke the blade, and with it, the thread of a past long buried. The Force stirred. Vader, elsewhere, felt something, a chill, a tremor. He could not name it, but it came from Tatooine, that cursed world, that beginning where he had been born, where his mother had died, where his soul had cracked. Now it called again, and the Emperor spoke in cold, measured tones. A new threat rises. Find it, end it. But Vader, for the first time in years, disobeyed. The order within. He waited, he listened, for beneath all the armor, all the noise, all the silence, a name echoed. Luke. A name he should not know, a name that should not be, and yet it fit. Kenobi fled with the boy. The Death Star rose. Alderaan died, and Luke stepped forward, not with mastery, but with courage. He fired the shot, the impossible shot, and the station fell. Vader survived, spinning into space, more spirit than man, and in that silence he heard the Force whisper, "The sun lives," not a threat, not a rival, a mirror, an echo, and perhaps a door. Obi-Wan was gone, struck down in fire and peace, but his last words lingered. In Vader's mind, "If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." And so he did, for in death, Obi-Wan became wind in Luke's sails. He became voice in the void. He became warning Vader began to chase, not a rebel, but a reflection. Each clash with Luke, each crossing of sabers, unraveled him. Not in power, but in memory. Luke fought not with hatred, but with hope, and hope was the one thing the Sith could not kill. Not fully, not forever. In the boy's eyes, the machine saw the ghost, not of Anakin's weakness, but of his love. And for the first time since Mustafar, the darkness hesitated. The Force leaned forward. The story turned. Chapter 14. The duel beneath the mask, the galaxy trembled, not from war, but from awakening. Across, moons and metals, stars and ruins. A whisper passed between rebels and tyrants alike. Skywalker lives, but they did not speak of Anakin. They meant the boy, the one who had destroyed the Death Star, who carried a saber not his own, and a name heavy with myth. Vader knew now what the Force had hidden. The child was his, not metaphor, not prophecy, blood, Luke. And with that truth came a fracture so small, so buried, that even the Emperor did not feel it, but the Force did it. It pulsed in Vader's chamber like a heartbeat. He stood before the stars, hands behind his back, watching a galaxy that no longer felt obedient, for the boy had lit a match, and fire remembers where to burn. The Emperor, veiled in foresight, spoke cold warnings. The boy is powerful. He must not be trained. But Vader said nothing. He listened. He plotted, for within the armor a thought had begun to form perhaps. Not all is lost. He did not yet understand the shape of this thought, only that it moved like breath inside a sealed tomb, that it made the darkness feel less permanent. He sought Luke not to destroy, but to offer something else, a chance, a future, a rule of two, but different, not master and slave, but father and son. He reached out through the Force, not with rage, but with memory, and Luke heard it. Their connection awakened. It was not verbal, not physical, it was ache. It was heat behind the eyes. It was name and blood and inheritance. And when the trap was sprung at Bespin, and Luke came, blade drawn, neither knew what would be spoken by the end. They fought. Through steam and metal, through shadows of the city in the clouds. Luke was brave, but untrained, each strike desperate, each breath faster than wisdom allowed. Vader did not kill. He tested, measured, watched. He spoke, not as executioner, but as architect. You have only begun to discover your power. He did not lie. He did not shout. He offered, join me, and we can end this destructive conflict. We can bring order to the galaxy. Luke, bloodied and broken, stood on the edge, between light and dark, between knowing and denying. And Vader, in a whisper carved into myth, spoke the truth. No, I am your father. The galaxy paused. The Force drew breath, and Luke chose the fall, not into darkness, but into fate. He did not yet believe, could not, but the seed had been planted, and seeds, like truths, do not die easily. Vader watched the boy vanish. He did not chase. He stood beneath the clouds, reaching through the Force once more. It is your destiny, not a threat, not a curse, a calling. For the first time since Pardames' death, he felt something like longing, not for power, not for victory, but for redemption, a word he could not yet speak. He returned to the Emperor in silence. Sidious mocked the failure, but Vader said nothing. He had begun to see the chains he once called purpose, and in Luke he saw a key, not to power, but to freedom. The machine turned. But within it Anakin stirred, not awake, not yet, but listening, waiting. Chapter 15. The Emperor's design darkness has many voices. Some scream, some whisper, but the Emperor's voice was silence, a void that devoured all questions. He sat upon a throne of iron and betrayal, veiled in rot and vision, his skin a map of corruption, his eyes twin suns of decay. He had waited for generations, not to rule, to reshape. The Republic had been the cocoon, the Jedi its soft skin, but the Empire was his chrysalis of war, and Vader was not apprentice. He was anchor, a monument to Sidious's triumph over prophecy, but something stirred. Now, a ripple in the pattern Luke Skywalker. The Emperor watched closely, not with fear, with hunger. He saw in the boy a convergence, the fire of the father, the wisdom of the mother, the stubborn light that refused extinction, and so he spoke. To Vader he grows stronger. He must be turned, or destroyed. But Vader's silence had changed, once a shield, now a boundary. Sidious noticed. He leaned in closer. If the son cannot be turned, perhaps the father must be broken again. The old master reached deeper into the Force, sending ripples toward Endor, toward the Death Star reborn, toward fate's final circle. He prepared a throne, not for rule, for theater. For Sidious understood what the Jedi had not. The Force does not reward righteousness. It rewards will, and his will was absolute. He did not fear the boy. He desired him to twist him, to claim him, to make of him a weapon greater than even Vader. And the trap was set. The rebels would come, the fleet would fall, Luke would surrender, and there, in the throne room above a dying moon, the cycle would close. But cycles, like chains, may break. Luke came as foreseen. He wore the robes of a Jedi, but his heart still trembled. He believed not in victory, but in the goodness buried beneath the mask. There is still light in him, Luke whispered. Sidious laughed. He saw not compassion. He saw weakness. He taunted the boy, spoke of Vader's past, of the temple burning, of the younglings slaughtered, of Padme's death, of a man who knelt before evil to stop fate, and became it. Luke faltered, but did not fall. He faced Vader. Again, not as prey, not as soldier, as son. The duel was slower now, heavy with sorrow. 2 lines of blood crashing like waves. And the Emperor watched. He did not interfere. He fed each strike. Each surge of anger nourished him. Luke cried out in fury, knocking Vader back. He saw the moment to strike, to end it. He looked at his own hand, flesh replaced with metal, a mirror, and he stopped. I am a Jedi, he whispered, like my father before me. The words shattered something in Vader, in the Force, in the plan. The Emperor's smile broke into rage. Then you will die. Lightning born of the abyss filled the air. Luke fell, twisting, screaming, burning, and Vader stood frozen. He watched the boy suffer. He heard the cries, saw the agony, and he remembered Padme's breath, Obi-Wan's tears, his own hands dripping with flame and ruin. And the silence cracked, not in metal. In soul he turned. The Emperor, focused, did not see, could not imagine. But Vader moved, not with speed, with purpose. He lifted Sidious, the storm of centuries, and cast him into the abyss. Screaming, the darkness screamed with him. Lightning carved across armor. Circuits failed. The machine collapsed. But the soul reached for light. Luke crawled to him, breath shallow. "Father, I won't leave you." And in that moment, the final moment, the mask was lifted, and Anakin Skywalker looked upon his son with eyes, not lenses. "You were right," he whispered. "Tell your sister, you were right." Then silence, but not emptiness. Peace. The Force held him, not as weapon, but as memory fulfilled. The prophecy, misread by all, had found its path, not through conquest. Through compassion, the Chosen One had brought balance, not by saving the galaxy, but by saving himself. Chapter 16. The Ashes of the Chosen One. Death Star burned. A moon wept fire into the void, and from its collapsing throne of steel and terror, a small ship escaped, carrying the last breath of a redeemed soul. Luke held the body with reverence, not the armor, not the machine, but the man, his father, lost and found in the final hour. He did not cry. Not yet. Grief came later, in quiet waves, in memory. For now, there was only silence, the kind that follows truth. The rebellion rejoiced on Endor. The tyrant was dead. The Empire's hand had been broken, and across the stars, hope rose like a second sun. But Luke did not join their songs. He walked alone, carrying the weight of a pyre, deep in the forests where Ewok drums could not reach. He built the fire. Wood, stone ritual, and there he placed the armor, the iron coffin that had caged a soul for decades. A shell forged by fear, broken by love. He lit the flame. It rose, orange, gold, white, a tower of memory, and as the smoke climbed into the sky, the Force trembled. It did not mourn, it shifted, for balance had been restored, not in power, in choice. Skywalker had chosen the light, freely, finally, and the darkness that had claimed him, that had ruled him, was undone. The fire consumed the mask. The breathing ended, and Luke stood still, eyes closed. Above, the stars watched. Elsewhere, the galaxy changed. The Emperor was dead. But the Empire would not vanish in a day, it would linger, clinging to systems and minds like a dying echo. But something new had begun. Leia felt it first. She stood with Han, but her gaze turned to the forest. A presence brushed her mind, familiar. Aching. Brother. Luke returned to them, changed, not in face, in knowing. He carried no saver now, only calm. He had walked through shadow and emerged not untouched, but unbroken. That night, as flames danced in celebration, he looked beyond the fire, and there silent, translucent, watching with eyes that held both sorrow and peace, stood the ghosts, Yoda, Obi-1. And Anakin, not as Vader, not as warrior, as the man he once was. Young, human, whole. Luke bowed his head, and the past bowed with him. The prophecy had never spoken of armies. It had never promised survival. It had only whispered of balance. And balance had come through love, through loss, through the hardest of all victories, forgiveness. The Force did not celebrate. It flowed, it remembered, and in the shadows between stars, Anakin Skywalker drifted, no longer weapon, no longer legend, but peace. Chapter 17. The Force remembers the galaxy spun onward, as it always had, but something ancient had shifted, not in governments, not in armies, but in the current that runs beneath all things. The Force remembered it had witnessed the fall of the Jedi, not with judgment, but with sorrow. It had watched the rise of the Sith, not with consent, but with patience. It had endured the silence of Darth Vader, the blinding agony of the purge, and the brittle, bright flicker of Luke Skywalker's hope. Don't now, it breathed again, not in harmony, but in balance. Anakin's sacrifice had not ended darkness. That was never its promise. What he had destroyed was imbalance. The rule of the Sith, in domination, in pain, in the lie that power is meaning, was broken. The Chosen One did not kill the darkness. He chose to stop feeding it, and so the Force began to shift, subtle, patient. Everywhere, a young child, on Corellia, reached out to catch a falling cup, and it stopped in the air. A farmer on Lothal dreamed of a great tree that spoke in colors and voices of Jedi long dead. A girl on Jakku stared at the stars, feeling a pull she could not name. The Force had never belonged to temples or orders. It was life. It was death. It was memory, and memory now carried Skywalker's name. Not Vader, not Destroyer, but the one who returned. The Jedi texts, once lost and scorched, found their way into new hands. Luke traveled not to conquer, to learn. He sought not power, but understanding. The failures of the past, the blindness of the old council, the arrogance of Sidious. He studied all. He did not rebuild the Jedi as they were. He knew better. Instead, he waited. He watched, and he listened to the Force. On Octu, he found the first temple, stone carved by nameless hands, echoes older than any republic. There he sat in meditation, not as a master, but as a student of silence. And the Force whispered to him, balance is not stillness, it is motion, it is choice. Elsewhere, Leia felt the truth awaken in her, not training, but inheritance. She did not seek the blade. She became a beacon, and the children of the future would remember her not only as leader, but as lightbringer. The Sith were gone, but not forgotten. Their temples still rotted beneath moons. Their hot still sang in fractured frequencies. Their teachings still waited, whispering promises to the desperate. The Force did not stop them. It had never stopped anything it offered, and each soul, Anakin, Luke, Leia, and all those yet to come, was given the same choice: to listen, to follow, to fall, to rise. That was the eternal current. And in the heart of that current, the memory of Skywalker remained, not as myth, as warning, as hope. Even now, when the stars go quiet and the wind of hyperspace howls through shattered halls, some say they hear his breath, not the cold hiss of Vader, but the steady rhythm of the man who came back, the man who chose his son over his master, his soul over his pain. The Force remembers, and it waits. Chapter 18, the last light of the Skywalker. There is no death. There is the Force, so whispered the Jedi, so echoed the Sith, yet neither understood the fullness of that truth. For death is not ending, it is remembering. And the Force remembers everything. It remembers the boy who raced pods in the dust, who dreamt of stars and carved angels from junk. It remembers the scream of his mother, the oath made in anguish. It remembers a Jedi who burned too bright, too fast, held together by prophecy and fear. A lover who could not save. A killer who did not know he had fallen until it was far too late. It remembers Anakin Skywalker, and it remembers Darth Vader, and it knows they are the same. It remembers the breath behind the mask, and the hand that once held a blade to a brother. It remembers Padme's final tears, and Obi-Wan's voice breaking in fire. But it also remembers the moment, that one moment when Anakin reached through it all to lift his son from death, not to win, but to choose, and that one choice rippled backward, and forward through the current of the Force, rewriting what could be, healing what was shattered. The Emperor fell, the Empire died. But the Skywalker name did not pass into Ashdot. It became seed. Luke wandered after the fire. He sought knowledge, but what he found was silence. The Force had quieted, not gone, listening, waiting for the next voice. He trained no armies, built no throne. He taught the Force as a question, not an answer. But darkness is never gone for long. In the cracks of fallen empires it gathered, in shadows, in bloodlines, in forgotten places where rage still clung like cobwebs. And yet, through all of it, the light of the Skywalkers flickered on. Leia, radiant with quiet strength, led a new resistance, even as war returned, wearing new masks. And in time, another came, a girl with no name, who heard the call through scavenged metal and desert wind. She carried no saber, no title, only longing. The Force touched her, as it once touched Anakin, as it once touched Luke, and through her, the story bent once more. For Skywalker was never blood, it was legacy. It was the voice that says, I will not fall. The hand that says, there is still good. The soul that says, I choose the light. Even in darkness, the Skywalker line ends, but its fire does not. It moves through stars, through rebels and lovers, through orphans and warriors. In every moment when the dark whispers, give in, the Force remembers the breath, just one. When a father looked at his son and chose to rise, and so it waits, it whispers, it listens. And when the stars fall quiet, when the galaxy forgets, the Force will remember. The last light of the Skywalker is not a name, it is a choice, and choices echo forever. ***, the end.